God won't allow it. There was a hint of chill in the air as they went to bed, and even though she shivered, Linda remained undeterred. "There's nothing wrong with my heart," she rejoiced. "I don't think there was anything truly serious the matter with me anyway. I guess I was just naturally irritable and anxious about you and Archer." Lisa May was now experiencing a romance stranger, and more astonishing than any she had ever read. In her imagination, she was able to look back and down at the fork as if she had been transported to another world, a world that was both ancient and serene, a world of enchanting trees, melodic streams, and tranquil peaks, a realm where law and order prevailed, upheld by a determined young man whose authority came directly from the president. She felt completely safe, just across the roaring mountain river, where the two brave protectors of the forest were camped. One of them, admittedly, had Swedish heritage, and the other was born in England, but they were both deeply American in their loyalty to the federal government, and she trusted them unquestioningly more than any other men in the entire West, except for Cooper. She had no doubt that there were others equally loyal, equally trustworthy, but she didn't know them. She fully grasped Morales's love for the high country and his passion for the cause, a cause that brought together a Yale student and graduates from Bergen and Oxford, making them comrades in the preservation of the trees and streams of the mountainous states against the encroachment of some of their fellow citizens, who were openly, short-sightedly, and cynically set on destruction, despoliation, and misuse. She had heard the conversation between the forest ranger and the manager, and she had gathered from them that Morales was confident about progressing quickly now that he had demonstrated his bravery and expertise. The idea that he might depart from the region to oversee a different forest made her somewhat anxious, as she and Linda had made plans to go to Sulphur City. She had agreed to this arrangement because it would still allow her the chance to occasionally see or communicate with Morales. However, the notion that he could potentially leave entirely diminished the joyousness of the stream's melody and cast a melancholic shadow over the future. Chapter 15. For the next 2 days, Morales barely slept as his patient's condition worsened. As the intensity of his fever increased, Sullivan desperately begged for fresh air. The ranger swung open the doors, allowing the cool and refreshing mountain breeze to flow in. He might as well die from a draft instead of suffocation, he thought to himself. Using cold cloths, he attempted to alleviate the itching and pain. "I have no formal training as a nurse, so what I'm doing may be completely wrong," he confessed to Swenson, who frequently came by to lean on the hitching post and offer assistance. "I know a ranger has to be a jack of all trades, cowboy, veterinarian, lumberjack, surveyor, and everything else, but I never realized they also had to be a skilled nurse." "How are you feeling?" his subordinate asked with concern. "Just tired, nothing more. I think I'll be able to avoid getting sick. I should be immune, but you never know. The effects of vaccination wear off after a few years. The women over there are extremely worried, and the elderly woman made me promise to call her if you show even the slightest signs of getting sick. Tell her not to worry, I'll be fine. I am closely monitoring myself, and another night will reveal the situation regarding the old man. I wish I had a real doctor, but I don't expect any. It is a long and difficult journey up here for one of those inexperienced individuals." He returned to his charge, and Swenson walked slowly away, back to the camp, burdened by the feeling of his complete helplessness. Throughout the day, Lisa May repeatedly went to the middle of the bridge, which was the boundary, and stood there hoping for some sign, some wave of the hand from her lover. Strange courtship. Yet with each passing hour, the bond that united these young souls grew stronger. In the intervals of her vigil, she cooked for him and sent small notes to him, along with the fish and potatoes. But no piece of paper came back to her, as Morales was meticulous in protecting her from even the slightest danger. Swenson delivered verbal messages indeed, but they were far from affectionate, for Morales knew better than to entrust any delicate expression of sentiment to this strong and robust young woodsman. Now that Lisa knew the enigmatic old man was dying, she yearned for his liberation, as his release would mean her lover's freedom. She did not pause to consider that it would be a long, very long time before she could touch Morales's hand, or even speak with him face to face. At times, under Swenson's straightforwardness, she grew weak with horror over the battle taking place in that silent cabin. This contagious disease, this offspring of overcrowded and unclean housing and foul ship cabins, seemed even more unholy in the pristine serenity of the hills. It was a desecration, a repulsive curse. If it were to seize Archer, words were inadequate to express her horror, her loathing for it. Oh, God, save him, she prayed 100 times each day. Twice during the night she got out of bed to listen, ensuring that Morales wasn't calling for assistance. The last time she peeked outside, a thin layer of frost covered the grass, and the faint glow of morning illuminated the eastern sky. In the clear, tranquil stillness of dawn, the disease seemed nothing more than a repugnant result of disturbed sleep. The door to the ranger's cabin was ajar, but everything was quiet. "He's stealing a quick 30 minutes of sleep," she concluded. If the guard had even considered allowing Linda to help Morales, that thought never materialized. By the third night, Sullivan was unconscious and unrecognizable to anyone who had known him during the days of the open range. In those days he was a nimble daredevil, skilled with ropes and guns, now a far cry from this scarred and swollen body, just as the majestic eagle is distant from the decaying carcass that it gazes upon with disdain. He was fading away, just as the Wild West was fading away, discredited, plagued, poisoned, incapable of revival, yet carrying something noble to his grave. It will be said that he played the role of a brave man. He had come to the aid of the poor Basque instinctively, with the same reckless indifference to his own well-being that defined his character when he was a cowboss on the range, taking on the most challenging tasks with his own rope or gun. Despite his suffering, his regard for the ranger to whom he was now entrusting his wife and daughter remained steadfast. He placed his hope and reliance in him. Once more, during a moment of clarity, he returned to the promise he had extracted from Morales. "If I go, you must take care of my girl, take care of Linda, too. Promise me that. Do you promise?" he insisted. "I swear on my honor," Archer repeated, and with a gentle squeeze of his hand, so delicate and feeble, Sullivan drifted into a daze that grew deeper with each passing hour, interrupted now and then by seizures that pained the resolute heart of the ranger, causing his hands to tremble with compassion. Throughout the day, as the clouds glided by, as white as snow and brilliantly pure, while the stream roared with the excitement of exploration, and the sunlight poured down in dazzling abundance upon the world, the ranger leaned over his charge or paced the floor of his cabin, marveling at how the air and light of this elevated place seemed so powerless to halt the advance of that relentless plague. It seemed that opening the doors, filling the room with radiance, would surely kill the rebellious particles that waged war on the tormented body. But amidst nature's majestic allure, the stench of the conflict rose, and he wondered if even the strength that his outdoor life had cultivated could withstand the strain for another day. Once Lisa May came close enough to hear his voice as he warned her to retreat. "You can't do anything," he called to her. "Please go away." His face was worn with fatigue, and her heart filled with bitter resentment at the thought that this repugnant battle, this painful obligation, should be thrust upon someone so remarkable. He himself felt as though his youth were fading, and that in these few days he had entered the serious, burdened years of adulthood. The one comforting thought, his one source of attraction, lay in the presence of the girl nearby, whom he could gaze at but couldn't utter a single tender word to. She stood there, where he could see her, watching and waiting at the bridge. "The sound of the water helps me endure the suspense," she said to Swenson, and the occasional glimpse of her beloved, knowing that he remained unbroken, kept her from sinking into despair. The day was well progressed when the sound of clattering stones on the hill behind his cabin caught his attention, and a few moments later a man on a tired horse rode up to his door and dismounted heavily. He was a small, dark individual wearing glasses, clearly from the city. "Watch out, smallpox!" called Archer as his visitor approached the door. The newcomer waved his hand dismissively. "I've had it. Are you Archer Morales?" "I am. My name is Hartley. I represent the Denver Roundup. I'm interested in this sheep herder killing only as a journalist," he added with a fleeting smile. "Did you know that old man Dunn from Deer Creek, committed suicide? Morales started, and his face hardened. No. They found him shot in the neck, dying this morning. As he was taking his last breath, he said, "The ranger knows." And when they asked, "Which ranger?" he said, "Morales." When I heard that, I immediately rode over here. Is this true? Did he tell you who the killers are? Morales did not answer right away. He felt like a man caught on a swaying bridge, and his first instinct was to grab onto the railing to regain his balance. Wait a minute. What does this mean to you? Once again, that peculiar grin illuminated the small man's dark, unhealthy face. It's a great detective trick, and besides, it means $20 per column and maybe some promotion. I can't wait, and you can't wait. It's up to us to take action now. If these men knew that you have their names, they would flee to Texas or the open seas. Come on now. Everyone tells me that you're one of those idealistic intellectuals who care more about the future of the West than most native Westerners. What's your plan? If you team up with me, we'll hunt down these villains and achieve great fame, and you'll be doing the entire country a favor. The ranger examined the small figure in front of him with a penetrating stare. There was a bold fearlessness in the stranger's face and eyes, and despite his calm, almost relaxed movement, one could sense a restless energy in his voice. "What's your plan?" the ranger asked. "We'll get ourselves deputized by the court and ambush these men before they realize what's happening. They believe they have the entire country on their side, but they're mistaken. They've gone too far this time, and there's been a tremendous backlash. Everyone knows that you've been impartial in dealing with these feuding Picts and Scots, and the court will be eager to deputize you to bring them to justice. The old sheriff is paralyzed. Everyone knows that the assassins are influential cattle ranchers, and yet no one dares to take action. It's up to you, representing law and order, to act swiftly." Morales understood him completely and felt a strong desire to carry out the plan. "I would do it if I could," he said, "but unfortunately I am taking care of a sick person. I may already be exposed to the same illness. I can't leave here for at least a week. It wouldn't be right for me to put others at risk. Don't worry about that. Take a hot shower, disinfect your clothes, shave your head. I'll find a replacement for you." Noticing Swenson and Linda on the bridge, he asked, "Who are those people? Can't they take over your nursing duties?" "No," Morales replied bluntly. "It's no use. I can't join you in this, at least not now. But you'll give me the names that Dunn gave you, right?" "No, I can't do that. I'll inform the supervisor, and he can take appropriate action for now. I'm confined here." The other man displayed his disappointment. "I'm sorry you're not willing to share. You know very well that nothing will ever be done about this unless the media demands it. It's up to you and me representing the conscience of the East," here he winked an eye, "and you, federal authority, to do what we can to bring these men to their punishment. Better reconsider. I'm speaking now as a citizen as well as a reporter." There was much truth in what he said, but Morales refused to go further in the matter until he had consulted with Cooper. "Very well," replied Hartley. "That's settled. By the way, who is your patient?" Eloquently, concisely, Archer told the story. "Just a poor old mounted hobo, a survival of the cowboy West," he said. "But he had the heart of a hero in him, and I'm doing my best to save him. Keep him in the dark. That's the latest theory, or under a red light. White light brings out the ulcers. He hates darkness. That's one reason why I've opened the doors and windows. All wrong. According to Finson, he wouldn't pit in the dark. However, it doesn't matter on a cowboy. You've a great story yourself. There's a fine situation here which I'll play up if you don't object." Morales smiled. "Would my objection have any weight?" The reporter laughed. "Not much. I've got to carry back some sort of game. Well, so long. I must hit the trail over the hill." Morales made civil answer and returned to his patient more than half convinced that Hartley was right. The power of the press might prove to be a very real force in this pursuit. As the journalist was about to mount his horse, he discovered Lisa May on the other side of the creek. "Hello," said he. "I wonder what this pretty maiden means." And dropping his bridle rein again, he walked down to the bridge. Swenson interposed his tall figure. "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. "You don't want to get too close. You've been talking to the ranger." Hartley studied him coolly. Are you a ranger too? No, just a guard. Why are you leaving Morales to handle it alone in there? Leitha explained. He won't let any of us come near him. Exactly, replied Hartley quickly. They say smallpox has lost its fears, but when you're 8 hours away from a doctor or a hospital, it's still a formidable enemy. However, Morales claims to be immune. We don't know that, Leitha said anxiously. Are you a doctor? No, I'm just a newspaper reporter, but I've had a lot of experience with plagues of all kinds. I had yellow fever in Puerto Rico and typhoid in South Africa. That's why I'm out here in the hills. But who are you, if I may ask? You look beautiful. My name is Lisa Sullivan, she replied honestly, drawn to the man's voice and eyes. And this is my mother. She pointed to Linda, who was approaching. You're not here for your health, he observed thoughtfully. How did you end up here? I was born here in the Fork. His face remained blank. I don't believe it. Can such lovely maidens come out of Battle Fork? But that's not what I mean. Why are you here in this wilderness? Linda joined the conversation. Another inspector? She asked, catching up. That's me, he replied. Sherlock Holmes, Vidocq, all in one. My mother, Leitha added again. Hartley's eyes showed disbelief, but he didn't voice his thoughts, recognizing Linda as a type he was familiar with, one that needed to be handled delicately. What are you two women doing here? Are you related to one of these rangers? Linda took offense at this. You're asking a lot of questions, Mr. Man. That's my job, was the confident response. And I'm not too old to handle a romantic situation. With that, he stopped the direct questioning and openly shared the details of his mission. Linda, showing complete understanding, invited him to have lunch, and he quickly learned their story, including the deep connection between Lisa May and the forest ranger plagued by disease. We're not completely impartial, he stated, referring to his newspaper. The roundup represents the New West to an extent, but for us, the New West means opportunities for profiting from water resources and unearned profits. Oh yes, we support the fruit and alfalfa growers because it's profitable. If the owner of my newspaper happened to be involved in the sheep business, like Senator Blank White, our stance would be different. Or if I were a congressman representing a district of cattle ranchers, I would hesitate to support any system that made me pay for grazing land. As it stands, I am tasked with exposing the ranchers responsible for killing those immigrants, and I will do it. If we had a sheriff like Morales in this country, we would have the murderers in custody within 2 days. He knows who they are, and I would appreciate his assistance. Unfortunately, he is stuck here and cannot escape. A few men like him could bring civilization to this accursed land. Afterward, he managed to elicit a description of the kind of person Archer Morales was from 3 different individuals, but the most significant words came from the girl. To her, this man with his notepad and pen was a magician, capable of elevating her hero and advancing progress in civilization with a simple movement of his hand. She liked him more and more, and became increasingly willing to share information, while he, recognizing her uniqueness, continued to ask questions. Then he stood up. I gotta go, he told Lisa. You've given me a great afternoon. Lisa May was completely clueless about how reporters operate, so she didn't mind him taking notes. She took his hand, thinking he was a genuine fan of her ranger. What's your plan? She asked. I'm heading back to Sulphur to spread the word about Morales' quarantine. He smiled meaningfully. I don't want any other newspaper guys getting involved in my scheme. I prefer to handle these stunts on my own, and I hope you'll keep quiet if they do show up. Goodbye. Not long after the reporter left, Morales called for Swenson. The old man won't make it through another night like last night, and I want you to convince Mrs. Sullivan and her daughter to go back to the valley. They can't do anything here, absolutely nothing. Please tell them that. Swenson repeated his orders with great emphasis, but both Linda and Lisa refused to leave. It would be heartless to abandon him in this desolate place, argued Linda. I'll stay until he's free, added Lisa. With a heavy heart, she crossed the bridge and walked towards the cabin until she was close enough to see the worry lines on her lover's exhausted face. Stop, he called out sharply. Stay away! Why won't you listen to me? Why won't you go back to the valley? Because I won't leave you alone. I can't. Please let me stay. I'm begging you to go back." The noise of the stream forced them to speak loudly, and he couldn't convey the tenderness he felt in his voice, but his face showed the pain as he asked, "Don't you realize you're adding to my anxiety, my pain?" "We're so worried about you," she replied. "It seems like we should be doing something to help you," he thought. He understood and appreciated the kindness that brought her so close to him, but he had to be firm. "There's nothing more you can do than what you're already doing. It comforts me to know you're here, but you mustn't cross the bridge. Please go back." There was both a plea and a command in his voice, and as she realized the passion behind his words, she turned back, her heart filled with joy. At sunset, Cooper returned, bringing medicine but no nurse. "No one will come up here," he said. "I suppose Archer is destined to face this alone. The isolation, the long journey scares off even the bravest. I tried and tried, but no luck. Eleanor would have come, of course. She insisted on coming, but I wouldn't allow it. She asked me to bring both of you down to the ranch." Lisa May thanked him, but insisted on staying until the danger to Morales had passed. Cooper crossed the bridge and left the medicine outside the door. The nurse from Sulphur refused to come when she found out her patient was in a mountain cabin. "I'm sorry, my friend. I did my best." "Don't worry," Morales replied. "I'm still free from any signs of fever. I'm tired, of course, but I can handle another night. My main concern is Lisa. Try to convince her to go home with you." "I'll do my best," Cooper responded. "But for now, you shouldn't think about leaving the Forest Service. I have some good news for you. The president has appointed a competent person as the chief." Morales's face brightened. "That'll definitely help," he exclaimed. "But who is this person?" Cooper revealed the name. "He was a student of the chief, and the chief says he's reliable, which satisfies me. Furthermore, he's a genuine forest ranger, and not a political opportunist or a corporate lawyer." "That's good," repeated Morales. "And yet," he said sadly, "it leaves the chief out just the same." "No, the chief is not out. He's where he can advocate for the idea to better advantage than when he was a subordinate under another man. Anyway, he asks us all to line up for the work and not to mind him. The work, he says, is bigger than any person. Here's that resignation of yours," he said, taking Morales's letter from his pocket. "I didn't put it on file. What should I do with it?" "Throw it to me," said Morales curtly. Cooper tossed it over the hitching post, and Archer picked it up, looked at it for a moment in silence, then tore it into pieces and threw it on the ground. "What are your orders, Mr. Supervisor?" he asked, with a faint, quizzical smile around his eyes. "There's nothing you can do but take care of this man. But as soon as you are able to ride again, I've got some special work for you. I want you to join with young Bingham, the ranger on Rock Creek, and line up the Triangle cattle. Murphy is reported to have released onto the forest nearly 1,000 head more than his permit allows. I want you to investigate that. Then complete your maps so that I can submit them on the 1st of November, and around the middle of December, you are to take charge of this forest in my place. Eleanor has decided to take the children overseas for a couple of years, and as I am to be over there part of the time, I don't feel justified in holding down the supervisor's position. I shall resign in your favor." "Wait now," he called warningly. "The district forester and I planned all this as we rode down the hill yesterday, and it's settled. Oh yes, there's one more thing. Old Man Dunn. I know. How did you learn it?" "A reporter came rushing over the hill around noon today, asking me to give him the names that Dunn had given me. I was strongly tempted to do as he asked. You know these journalists are sometimes the best at finding criminals, but then I decided to wait until I had discussed the matter with you. I don't have much faith in the county authorities." "Normally I would have my doubts too," replied Cooper. "But the whole country is in an uproar, and this time we're going to apprehend these men for sure. The best investigators and the major newspapers all across the West are demanding law enforcement action, and the reward we have offered—" He paused suddenly. "By the way, that reward will go to you if you can help in the arrest of the criminals." "The reward should go to Dunn's family," replied the ranger solemnly. "Poor guy. He has sacrificed himself for the benefit of the state." "That's true. His family is in a tough situation." Morales abruptly stopped the conversation. I must go back to, he had almost said back to Sullivan. My patient needs me, he exclaimed. How is he doing? He's definitely dying. In my opinion, he won't make it through the night, but as long as he's conscious, I need to be there. Cooper walked back across the river slowly, contemplating the ranger's brave determination. It may not be the most obvious kind of courage, but it's courage nonetheless, he said to himself. Meanwhile, Linda and May, left alone by the fire, had drawn closer to each other. The girl's face, so lovely and contemplative, deeply moved the older woman's compassion. Memories of her own youth resurfaced. Being away from the town and all its connections made her more considerate, more thoughtful. She wanted to speak, but found it difficult to start. Finally, she said, with a hint of sarcasm in her tone, You like Archer Morales almost as much as I do myself, don't you? The girl blushed slightly, but her gaze remained unwavering. I wouldn't be here if I didn't, she replied. Neither would I. Well, now I have something to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago, something that Archer should know. I intended to tell you that first day you came back, but I couldn't find a way to do it, and I kept postponing it until, well, then I grew fond of you, and each day made it more difficult. Here she made her greatest effort. Child, I'm an old liar. I'm not your mother at all. Lisa stared at her in astonishment. What do you mean? She asked. I mean your real mother died when you were a tiny baby. You see, I was your father's second wife. In fact, you weren't even a year old when we got married. Ed made me promise never to let you know. We were supposed to raise you just the same as if you were a child to both of us. Nobody knows except Reddy. I told him the day we came up here. The girl's mind raced through the past as she listened. The truth of the revelation hit her immediately, explaining 100 peculiar things that had puzzled her all her life. The lack of deep affection between herself and Linda was clarified. Their differences in habits, temperament, and thoughts all became clear. But my mother, she finally exclaimed. Who was my mother? I never saw her. You see, Ed came into the country with you, a little motherless baby. He always said your mother was a wonderful woman, but I never even saw a photograph of her. She was a well-educated woman. He said a woman from the South, and her name was May. But that's all I can tell you about her. Now I'm going to inform Archer about all of this as soon as I can. It will make a significant difference in his opinion of you. She expressed all of this in a manner similar to how a man would, with a steady voice and bright eyes. However, Lisa May could sense the deep emotion that resonated beneath her harsh tone, and her heart felt a newfound tenderness towards the lonely woman. Now that she no longer had to defend her mother's faults that she could now disregard, and now that she could see her as a loyal friend, she felt moved to pity and love. Rising, she approached her and embraced her, saying, This won't change anything. I will stay with you and assist you just the same. Tears welled up in the old woman's eyes, and her voice trembled as she replied, I knew you would say that, Lisa May, but regardless, I don't intend for you to do any such thing. You must distance yourself from me entirely because someday a wonderful person will come along, and they won't even want me as a stepmother-in-law. No, I have decided that you and I are better off living separately. I'll find you a place to live in Sulphur where I can visit you from time to time. But I suppose I am destined to remain here in the Fork. They don't like me, and I don't like them. But I have grown accustomed to their judgmental glances. They don't matter as much as they would in the city. Lisa turned back longingly to the tale of her mother. Where did my mother meet my father? Do you know that? No, I don't. It was a spontaneous match, Ed said. I never knew who her parents were, but I know they thought she was marrying the wrong man. The girl sighed as her mind grasped the significance of her mother coming to this untamed country, leaving behind everything she knew and loved. Poor little mother. It must have been very difficult for her. I'm afraid she did have a tough time, because Ed confessed to me that he didn't even have a saddle when he arrived in the state. He didn't have much when I first met him, but everyone liked him. He was one of the most attractive men I've ever seen, but he was tight-lipped. You couldn't get anything out of him that he didn't want to share, and I was never able to find out what he had been doing in the southern part of the state. As she reflected on her altered relationship with Linda, Lisa's heart lightened. It would make a difference to Archer. It would make a difference to the Coopers. Disloyal as it seemed, it was a tremendous relief, a joy to know that her own mother, her biological mother, had been kind. She must have been kind, or Linda wouldn't have said so, she reasoned, recalling that her stepmother had admitted to feeling jealous. Finally, Linda got up. "Well, dearie, I think it's time for us to go to bed. It's getting chilly and late." As they were about to part at the tent's entrance, May held Linda's face in her hands. "Good night, Mother," she said, and kissed her, to demonstrate that what she had said wouldn't make any difference. But Linda wasn't fooled. This unexpected gesture made it perfectly clear to her the relief that filled the girl's heart. Lisa May was awakened several hours later by a roaring, crackling noise and by the glow of a yellow light on her tent. The cabin was filled with poison. It had become a disease-ridden spot to me, and there was no other way to eradicate it. I would have never felt secure if I had even sent a single letter. Silent and trembling from the cold of the morning, Lisa May approached, getting closer and closer. "I am deeply sorry," she said, and longed to comfort him, but he motioned for her to stay away. "Please do not come any closer, for I cannot touch you." "But you are not sick," she exclaimed, with a hint of fear in her voice. He smiled in response to her question. "No, I only feel exhaustion and a little sadness. I can't help but feel like I am losing a part of myself in that fire. The saddle I have used for years, my guns, ropes, spurs, everything related to the forest is gone, and with them, my youth. I have been somewhat of a careless adventurer myself, I'm afraid, but that is all over now." He looked at her with a melancholy and determined gaze. "The Forest Service transformed me into a man, taught me to consider the future. I never took on any responsibility until I became a ranger, and upon reflecting on it all, I have decided to continue with it, as the guys say, until the spring rains come." "I am very pleased to hear that," she said. "Yes. Dalton believes I can meet the requirements for the supervisor position, and Cooper might offer me the chance to supervise this forest. If he does, I will accept it if you will come with me and share the modest home that comes with the supervisor's salary. Will you come?" In the glow of his burning cabin and beneath the towering peaks, Lisa May couldn't help but feel a certain grandeur and dignity of spirit. She didn't blush or stumble as she replied, "I will go anywhere in the world with you." He couldn't even touch the edge of her dress, but his eyes embraced her as he said, "God bless you for the faith you seem to have in me." Cooper's voice interrupted with enthusiastic noise. "And now, Miss May, you go back and prepare some breakfast for all of us. Swenson, bring the horses in and harness my team. I'm going to take these women down the canyon. And Archer, you better saddle up as soon as you feel rested and ride across the ridge and go into camp in that little old cabin by the dam above my house. You'll have to be isolated for a few days, I suppose, until we see how you're doing. I'll call the Fork and have the place made ready for you, and I'll have the doctor go up there to meet you and take care of you. If you're going to be sick, we'll want you where we can take care of you. Isn't that right, Lisa May?" "Indeed it is," replied the girl earnestly. "But I'm not going to be sick," retorted Morales. "I refuse to be sick." "Absolutely correct," replied Cooper. "But nevertheless, we want you where we can reach you, and where we have access to proper medical help. I'm going to bring my bed over here and put you in it. You need rest." Lisa still stayed behind after Cooper left them. "Please do as Mr. Cooper tells you," she pleaded, "because I will be very worried until you safely reach the bottom of the mountains. If that poor old man has any family, they should be informed of how kind you have been. You couldn't have been kinder to one of your own people." Her words carried a deep meaning that made it difficult for him to respond. His tone was intentionally light as he replied, "I would be a fraud if I stood here listening to your praise without confessing how incredibly tired I got of the whole business. It was simply that there was nothing else to do. I had to continue." Her mind still dwelt on the tragic event. "I wish he could have had some kind of a service. It seems kind of cruel to bury him without anyone to say a prayer over him. but I suppose that was impossible. Surely someone should mark his grave because some of his family may come and want to know where he lies. He directed her thoughts to more pleasant topics. I am glad you are going with the supervisor. You're going, right? Yes, for a few days until I'm sure you're safe. I will be tempted to pretend to be sick just to keep you near me, he was saying when Cooper returned, bringing his sleeping couch. Unrolling this under a tree beside the creek, the supervisor said, "Now get into that." Morales resigned Lisa with a smile. "Good night," he said. "Oh, but it's good to remember that I will see you tomorrow." With a happy glance and a quiet goodbye, she turned away. Laying aside his blanket and his shoes, Morales crawled into the snug little camp bed. "Ah," he breathed, with a delightful sense of relief. "I feel as if I could sleep for a week." And in an instant his eyes closed in sleep so deep that it was devoid even of dreams. When he woke up, it was noon, and Swenson, the guard, was standing over him. "I'm sorry, but it's time to start moving," he said. "It's a long ride over there." "What time is it?" asked Morales with some confusion. "Nearly noon. I have some coffee ready. Want some?" "Do I?" "Just watch me." And he jumped out of his bed with enthusiasm and stretched himself like a cat, exclaiming, "Wow, but it feels great to know that I'm out of jail." Going down to the stream, he splashed his face and neck in the clear, cold water, and the brisk rubbing that followed seemed to clear his mind as well as increase his appetite. "You seem all right so far," suggested the guide. "I am all right, and I'll be fine tomorrow, if that's what you mean," replied Morales. "Well, now pack up and we'll leave." For a few moments after he mounted his horse, Morales looked around the area as if for the last time, now up at the hill, now down at the meadow, and lastly at the stream. "I hope you'll enjoy this location as much as I have, Swenson. It's one of the most beautiful in the entire forest." Together they zigzagged up the side of the hill to the north, and then with Morales in the lead, followed by his pack-horse, they started on the long lateral moraine which led by a wide circle through the wooded park towards the pass. The weather was clear and cold. The wind was biting, and Morales, wearing minimal clothing, pulled his coat close around his neck, saying, "I now understand how it feels to be a Native American wrapped in a blanket. I must say I prefer a jacket." A little later, the sharp eyes of the guard, scanning the mountainside, were suddenly caught. "There's a group of cowboys coming over the pass," he called. "I see them," responded Morales. "Take out your binoculars and tell me who they are." Swenson took off his binoculars and examined the group closely. "Looks like Van Horn's chestnut horse in the lead, and that white-faced bay just behind looks like the one Patrick rides. I don't seem to recognize the other two." "Maybe it's the sheriff coming after me for harboring Edwards," suggested Morales. But Swenson remained serious. He did not find the joke funny. "What are they doing in the forest, anyway?" he asked. 30 minutes later, the two groups encountered each other on a small piece of grassland in the middle of the wooded valley. There were 4 people in the sheriff's group: Patrick, the deputy, and a large man whom Morales didn't know. Their horses were all exhausted, and the large civilian appeared weary from riding. "Good evening, gentlemen," the sheriff called out in a southern manner as he approached. "Good evening, Mr. Sheriff," Morales politely replied. "What's the reason for this invasion of my forest?" The sheriff, in response, introduced the large stranger. "Mr. Morales, this is Mr. Simpson, the district attorney." Morales nodded at the attorney. "I've heard of Mr. Simpson," he said. Simpson answered Archer's question. "We were on our way to your property, Mr. Morales, because we heard that this old man, Dunn, who shot himself, had visited you before his death and provided you with information about the murder of the Mexican sheep herders. Is that true?" "It is." "When did he visit you?" 2 or maybe 3 days ago. I'm a bit confused about it. You see, I've been confined to my cabin for the past few days." Patrick interjected with a question. "How is the old man?" "He's fine, or rather, he's dead. He died last night." The sheriff exchanged a meaningful look with Simpson. "Well, I suppose that settles his case, Judge. Even if he was involved, he's no longer a part of it." "He couldn't have been involved," the ranger declared, "because he was with me when the murder was committed. I left him up on the mountain at the Basque herders' camp. I can provide an alibi for him. Furthermore, he had no motive for such a deed." "What did Dunn tell you?" the sheriff demanded. "What names did he give you?" "Hold on a moment," replied Morales, who felt himself to be on his own turf and didn't want to be rushed. "Is there a reward offered for the capture of these guys?" "There is," replied the lawyer. "Well, before I give my statement, I'd like to request that any reward that may come my way be paid to the widow of the person who provided me with the information. Poor guy. He sacrificed himself for the good of the state, and his family should be spared as much suffering as possible." "Absolutely right, Mr. Morales. You can consider that request granted. Now let's get to the facts." "Before we dive into that, Mr. Lawyer, I'd like to talk to you alone." "Very well, sir," replied the lawyer. Then, motioning towards the others, he said, "Guys, just ride off a bit, will you?" When they were alone, Morales remarked, "I don't think it's wise to spread these names around, because if we do, more fugitives will be on the run." "I see your point," Simpson agreed. With that, the ranger quickly and succinctly reported what Dunn had said, and the lawyer listened thoughtfully without saying a word until the end. Then he added, "That matches up with what we've heard from Musina." "Was Musina involved?" asked Morales. "Yes, we got a confession out of him. If he was involved, it was purely for the money. He was representing someone else." "What makes you think that?" "Because he was desperate to get back to the show he used to perform in, and he was in dire need of money. Have you considered that Patrick might have had a hand in this situation?" Dunn said he did, even though he wasn't present at any of the meetings. This seemed to surprise the lawyer a lot. "But he's a rancher," he exclaimed. "I know he is, but he's also a silent partner in the Triangle cattle operation, and he's causing us a lot of trouble. And, in addition, he had a grudge against these foreigners, as he refers to them, because they were occupying land that he wanted for himself." "I don't think he's deserving of it," Simpson replied, "but I doubt he had any involvement in the murder. He's too sly and too cowardly. However, I will keep your words in mind, and if he is implicated in any way, he will face the same consequences as the others, regardless of his wealth." As they returned to the gathering, Morales thought he noticed a change in Patrick's eyes, a flicker of light that wasn't there before, but he didn't attempt to convince the lawyer or the sheriff any further. He simply stated, "Well, gentlemen, I must continue on to the other side of the mountain. I have an appointment with the doctor there, as well as a comfortable bed and warmer clothing than I currently have on. If I can be of assistance to you once I am out of quarantine, please don't hesitate to call on me." "It's possible that we may require your help in locating some of the individuals whose names you have provided," the attorney acknowledged. "Very well," Morales replied. "If they are anywhere in the forest, the supervisor and I will locate them for you." And so they bid farewell, and Morales and his escort resumed their leisurely journey across the mountain range. Chapter 16. In her career as the spouse of a Western rancher, Eleanor Cooper had been asked to host numerous peculiar visitors, and she didn't strongly object when her husband called to inform her that he was bringing Linda as well as Lisa May to stay at Elk Lodge for a few days. The disclosure of the genuine connection between the two women had, as Linda expressed, caused a significant change for Mrs. Cooper. It naturally alleviated some of the daughter's burden, and had also made the mother's behavior less disagreeable. Moreover, Eliza's unwavering loyalty to Archer, her courageous defense of him against attack, and her love and bravery that allowed her to rise from illness and journey to the mountains, determined to take on the role of nurse. These were not the qualities of an ordinary individual. "I'm starting to realize that I've been unfair to Mrs. Sullivan," she confessed to her spouse. She had only seen Linda once, in the distorted atmosphere of the restaurant, and her memory of her was of a frumpy, frowning woman with unruly hair and a watchful gaze. Hence, she was profoundly taken aback when Lisa May introduced a soft-spoken, somewhat melancholic elderly lady as her mother. "I'm pleased to meet you, Mrs. Sullivan," Eleanor said with her innate courtesy. "I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to come," replied Linda. "I told Reddy, the supervisor, that you didn't want an old-timer like me, but he insisted I come along and Lisa helped me get ready, so here I am." She spoke with a hint of self-deprecation, but she was by no means vulgar or ordinary. Indeed, she displayed Lisa's attentiveness, and although her demeanor was clearly influenced by Lisa's instructions, it was never laughable. She was openly curious about the house and its beautiful belongings, and she softly swore in surprise and delight. "Imagine an old cowhand like me appreciating these fancy trinkets." As they walked to their room together, she made a confession. "The thing that frightens me the most is eating. I've eaten at Alma enough times, but to handle a fork here with Eleanor Cooper watching. Goodness gracious. Isn't there a way to have my meals out in the barn? I wouldn't mind you, Archer and Reddy. It's the missus." Archer had not yet arrived at the cabin, but Cooper had warned Lisa not to expect him until after dark. "He probably overslept, and besides, there are always delays on the trail. But don't worry. Swenson will ride to the top of the divide with him, and if it seems necessary, we'll come all the way." This feeling of anxiety helped to steady Linda, and she got through the meal very well. She was unusually quiet, and a little sad as well as constrained. She could see that Lisa fitted in with these surroundings, that she was at home with shining silverware and delicate dishes, and she said to herself, "I could have been something like her if I had any kind of opportunity. But it's too late now. But oh, Lord, wouldn't Ed like to see her now?" It was not yet dark when they came out on the porch to meet the doctor, who had come to meet Archer, and Lisa's anxiety led her to say, "Can't we go up to the cabin and wait for him there?" "I was about to suggest that," replied Cooper. "Shall we walk?" Lisa was eager to leave immediately, but Linda said, "I never was much for walking, and now I'm stuck here. You go ahead and I'll sit on the porch here and watch." So Lisa, the doctor, and Cooper went off together across the meadow toward the little cabin which had been built for the workers while putting in the dam. It was hardly a mile away, and yet it stood at the mouth of a powerful gorge, out of which the water sprang white with speed. But Lisa had no interest in the scenery, though her eyes were lifted to the meadow's wall, down which the ranger was expected to ride. It looked incredibly steep, and whenever she thought of him descending that trail, worn and perhaps unwell, her heart ached with anxiety. But Cooper chatted comfortably, explaining the situation to the doctor, who, being a very practical person, seemed to take it all in stride. At the cabin itself, Lisa shifted her focus to the dinner that had been prepared for the park ranger, and she went around the room trying to make it a little more comfortable for him. It was a simple place, hardly more than a campground, as was appropriate, and she sincerely hoped that he wouldn't have to be sick there, as it was located in a cold and gloomy spot, right under the shadow of a large rock wall. As it got dark, she lit a lamp and placed it outside the window so that its light could catch the ranger's attention, and indeed it did, as almost immediately a gunshot echoed from the hillside above, signaling his arrival. "There he is!" she exclaimed, quickly filled with joy. "Did you hear him shout?" His voice could indeed be heard, although faintly, and so they waited as the darkness deepened and the sound of the stream rose like a breath, growing louder as the night fell. Finally, they could hear the sound of his horse's hooves on the rocks, and with a youthful impulse, Lisa let out a musical cry, both an invitation and a joyful signal. In response, the ranger vocally replied, and they could soon see him moving across the hillsides, zigzagging like a hiker, descending with incredible speed. He was alone and leading his horse, but his quickness of movement and the tone of his voice indicated confidence and good health. The doctor chuckled as he said, "I don't think a very ill man could come down a mountain like that." "Oh, he's not sick yet," Cooper said. "What we're worried about is a potential complication." As the ranger rushed down the final slope, he found his knees weakened not only by fatigue but also by excitement. To hear Lisa's clear voice down there, to know that she was waiting for him, made him feel like the luckiest man alive. Escaping infection and being on his way to a higher position were insignificant compared to the allure of that youthful shout. He saw the lamp shine in the distance, but he could not make out the girl's figure until he emerged from the cluster of pine trees that concealed the end of the path. Then they all shouted together, and Cooper, turning to Lisa, cautioned, "Now, my dear girl, we must not interfere with the doctor. We will immediately return to the house." "Not yet. Not until we've seen him and spoken with him," she pleaded. "I don't think there's any danger," said the doctor. "But perhaps you shouldn't wait." Morales approached with gleaming eyes and labored breath. "I made it, but oh, I'm exhausted. I've never been this tired in my life." He looked at her as he spoke. "But I'm feeling great. This is Dr. French, Archer." "How are you, Doctor? I'm not shaking hands these days." "We'll see about that," replied the physician. "I encountered the sheriff on the way, Mr. Supervisor, and I shared the story Dunn told me, and I requested that the reward for the information be given to Dunn's widow." "I'll take care of that," Cooper responded. "And now we'll leave you to the doctor's care." "I made some coffee for you, and you'll find some dinner under a napkin on the table," explained Lisa. "Thank you." "I'm sorry it's not better. It's just cold chicken and sandwiches." "Just cold chicken," he laughed. "My main concern is that it might not be a whole chicken. I'm as hungry as a coyote." "Well, now, good night," said Cooper. "Doctor, will you report as you pass by?" "Yes, expect me in about half an hour." And so Lisa walked away with Cooper, almost completely relieved of her worry. "He can't be sick, can he?" she asked. "I don't see how he could be. His life has made him as pure and resilient as a sturdy oak tree on a gusty hillside. He is perfectly fine and extremely happy. Your presence there to greet him was very endearing to him. I could perceive that. If it turns out that you are the one who will keep him here and in the Forest Service, I will be very grateful to you." She did not respond to this, but walked alongside him in silence, feeling very insignificant, very modest, but very content. Linda was on the porch. "Did he make it?" "He's perfectly fine so far," replied Cooper cheerfully. "We left the doctor about to scold him. We'll receive a report soon." They had barely finished recounting how the ranger had descended the hill when the doctor arrived. "He doesn't have a trace of it," was his report. "All he needs is rest. I disconnected him from his entire over-the-range gear, and there's no reason why he shouldn't join you for breakfast in the morning." Mrs. Cooper thanked the doctor as fervently as if he had done her a personal favor, and the girl echoed her grateful words. "Oh, that's fine," the doctor replied in true Western style. "I'll do even more for you any time." And he rode away, leaving at least one person too elated to sleep. The same person was on the porch the next morning when Morales, dressed in the supervisor's finest gray suit, strode across the lawn, too impatient to follow the winding driveway. As he approached, his face radiant with restored health, Lisa considered him the deity of the morning and went to meet him unabashed, and he embraced her and kissed her just as he had promised himself. "Now I know that I am saved," he exclaimed, and together they embarked on the construction of a home in the New West. The end. This concludes Frontier Desire, a Western romance novel. Written by Leitha Watson. Visit brooksaudiobooks.com for updates on the availability of new books and a special free offer.